couple of people, and then we will kick off properly. Awesome, sick. Welcome to the Black Education panel. As I said earlier, I hope you guys have been enjoying the conversation so far. My name is Renee, for those of you that don't know me or have never met me, and I've been working as digital programs lead at Supa Network. And we are essentially a hub for entrepreneurs and aspiring creatives in industry. So yeah, big welcome this evening. I was about to say afternoon, but it's really evening. And yeah, I just want to take the time to say thank you to all the other organizations that have been a part and parcel of putting this together on Blackout Day. And of course, a preliminary thank you to our wonderful panelists who will soon be introducing themselves. Let me just find and unmute y'all real quick. Awesome. So yeah, I guess we'll just start with the intros on the part of our two lovely panelists. I would love to introduce you guys. You guys are some excellent people doing some amazing things, but I guess I will hand it over to both of you to really talk, about your work, what you do. And yeah, so I guess we'll start with James. Feel free to take the floor and let the audience know a little bit about yourself.
So first of all, thank you guys for having me. Obviously, I'm next to two juggernauts in terms of accomplishments. So if I start fanboying just randomly in the middle, like don't be surprised. So as Renee said, I'm James Frater. I'm currently studying medicine at King's. I've just finished an integrated degree in management at Imperial Business School. I think for me, like just a bit of background, like why I kind of got into medicine. I grew up in Jamaica. Suffered really bad asthma, and I realized there was just like inequality in the world, and I kind of wanted to help with that. But then coming to the UK, sort of realized that Black Caribbean boys just weren't getting the support that they needed. And I think post school, this is why I've sort of dedicated a lot of my time into increasing access into universities. I currently work for King's, so I look at increase the number of African Caribbean students that come into King's, and I'm looking to see how I can affect that more broadly in Russell Group, and then like just across the higher education sector. Also a governor, again, links back to Black Caribbean boys, because that's super important to me that they get the support that they need. And finally, I run a social enterprise where we look to upskill students holistically, but also help schools to make sure that they get the work experience that they need, and that the students are able to articulate that. So when it comes to interview, CV writing, etc., they're able to essentially like tell the world what they're doing. I think more generally, and kind of like the last point is, I think I want to spend the rest of my life building things that are sustainable and scalable, and that help the most in need people in the world. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do. But thank you for having me.
Awesome. Honestly, a pleasure, James. And yeah, the work that you've been doing is absolutely awesome. And one thing that you guys will notice about our two panelists is they have a propensity to be extremely humble about the work that they do. James was actually a recipient of the Diana Award pretty recently. So congratulations on that, James. And yeah, we're super excited to have you. And now passing on to the Titan, that is Courtney Daniela, if you want to give us a quick intro.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me as well. It really is an honor and a pleasure to be here. So yeah, I mean, it's very hard to follow all of that. So yeah, so after I graduated from the University of Cambridge in 2018, having studied human, social and political sciences, I became a beauty entrepreneur. Now, I've always worked in the beauty industry. It's always been my passion, specifically hair. And I've worked, in startups previously, but I just wanted to start something which solved the problems that I was facing in the industry as both a consumer and a hairstylist. And I decided to pursue creating something that was easy and very consumer centric. So providing content that allowed the product to be used easier for the customer. I've been doing that now for 2 years, and we now have an amazing team of 5 young women who are doing bits, like they're doing amazing in working on this as a project that goes out as a global brand. And so, yeah, CDB London literally is what I've been dedicating myself to for the last 2 years. But also, whilst I was at university and now, I am still a digital content creator. I create videos online and content generally for myself and for brands that allow for people to have kind of insight into the life of somebody like myself from my background, like a low socioeconomic background, just trying to figure life out, whether that be business, education, relationships, whatever it is. And I try to just portray the transparency of it all, just trying to be an example of a leader who is a real human being and a person and trying to figure it out at 23 years old. So that is pretty much me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Courtney. Like I said, propensity for humbleness. Courtney was also named as one of the top 25 Black British business leaders in Forbes. So congratulations, Courtney. We're amongst some really amazing people. And like I said, such an honor to have both of you on. To give a quick background on myself, as I said earlier, my name is Renee. I'm super passionate when it comes to education and all things Blackness, Black people. I studied history for my undergrad at Oxford and went on to do my master's degree at Harvard. And following that, have worked with a couple of early stage companies in growth and marketing, and currently work as digital programs lead at Supa Network. So that is a comprehensive overview as to all of us. And now digging into the panel, before we actually go into some of the questions, please be populating the chat. I'm watching it. If you've got any questions for us, any comments, feel free to make it your home. We want to hear from you. But yeah, in terms of the first question that I have for you both, and Courtney, I think I'll start with you. What do you think are the main problems facing the Black community in higher education or education generally?
So I think previously and even currently, it's definitely like the pipeline to education. So I wouldn't say it's just in higher education and that's when you first start experiencing the issues. I think once you're in the education system more generally within the UK, I think there are things set up against you in terms of the perception of you as a student, your access to particular opportunities, and things that would expose you to the different options that you may have. I think oftentimes children are like pigeonholed into the funnel that they should take for the course of their life. And by the time they turn 18 and are about to enter higher education, if that's their desire, they're either stuck with this is the only option for me, or believing that it's not an option for them, or the caliber of university maybe, or what course they want to do is seen as not for them. So I think it's a huge perception issue in the minds of maybe teachers and gatekeepers in that field, but also within households sometimes as well, due to social background and resources available, such as the economic status of the household, and just the social capital involved. So I think also a lack of information available. I know even for me when I was applying to university, or not even a lack of the information, but access to it. So oftentimes people would just be like, just it's all on the internet, and you're thinking, where? Like the internet is a very vast place, don't know where to go. And because you don't have access to maybe an actual person who has done what it is you're trying to do, it's hard to have your questions answered, particularly if you're going to a school in a low socioeconomic area where they might not have a clue about what it is you're trying to do. So I think that information is provided, but the way it's spread may be poor. I think the resources are now maybe more so being funneled into getting people who don't have access to information very easily, getting them that information. So I'd say those are a few issues.
Awesome, thank you for that. James, you want to chime in there?
Yeah, I think as Courtney said, there are a number of problems along the pipeline. I think if we look at higher education, we start there, I guess. The problem is there's not inclusive spaces. We tell a lot of these young people, oh, go to these universities, they're great, excellent. But if you look at, like, I've had numerous testimonies, and you can both probably testify to this. Like, going to Oxford and Cambridge, like, it's great, but in terms of like how you navigate a space, in terms of like the mental toll it takes on a lot of people, that's a lot of conversations that people aren't having, or they've had, but the reality of it just it doesn't come across enough, I think. And I think until these institutions actually become inclusive spaces where all people from all types of background can actually thrive, there's going to be a huge problem and a huge barrier and a huge sense of, actually, this isn't a space for me, and this isn't a space I can thrive. As much as there's a lot of like diversity campaigns, etc., there isn't enough like actually putting in the infrastructure to make it inclusive. And I think if you look at the pipeline more generally, and you look at like Black students, particularly Black boys, and obviously I'm going to talk about Caribbean boys, like you look at from year 6 onwards, there's, in terms of like their progress scores, there's normally a regression. So they're normally, I can't remember how many months, by the end of GCSE, there's some months, if not years, behind their peers. And obviously that's a huge problem, and that's a systemic failure of the education system to not cater to them. If you even take it back to like Windrush and sort of that relationship with education, I think, what was it, 3-4 generations now, 3 generations, automatically a lot of students were made to do test their IQ, and a lot of them were biased towards middle class white people. So obviously a lot of them didn't do too well. Then they were put in special educational needs with sort of the promise that, oh, if they do well, they would then go into mainstream education, which never happened. So there's already that, I guess, distrust or bad relationship with education system, which I think has continued and has sort of been passed down generations. So I think rectifying that relationship is super important. I'm not sure how that happens, because then that helps with engagement. I think even when like I'm organizing events, it's super hard to engage with Caribbean students, because a lot of them just don't know about opportunities. It's very difficult to access them and get to them. So I think, yeah, there's so many challenges. Yeah, there's so many.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate that insight, James. And there was just a question about whether you think that primary/secondary schooling sets Black children up to fail. So I'll chime in on that real quick. In a way, yes, in the sense that when we're thinking about institutions and the way that institutions are built, a lot of them, as James touched on earlier, are not built with multiculturalism in mind, right? We've got institutions in our country, in the United Kingdom, that go back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And in terms of where these ideologies, like the prevailing ideologies, underpinning a lot of educational curriculum or, pedagogy, a lot of these things were not founded with multiculturalism or, embracing Black communities at all. In fact, when we look at a lot of, narratives around history and all that good stuff, a lot of these things tend to cultivate particular worldviews that are not as inclusive, right? They're not as diverse, that being the buzzword that's thrown around so much these days. So there's that element, but would also like to kick that around to you both as well, starting with you, James, in terms of, how do you think specifically something like primary school/secondary school may not be the most conducive experience for young Black people?
I think I think the problem I find when I'm working in schools or working with students, particularly of a younger age, is two things. It's twofold. Teachers aren't trained to sort of deal with the person. I feel like they're trained to deal with the student. So that means that a lot of students will come into school with problems from home, with things that they're carrying on their shoulders. And the teacher doesn't see that. They just see, this is a student, or this is a class, I need to teach X, Y, and Z. So then when you have a child, I always use this as an example, when you have a child, I'm not saying like all Black people are poor, etc. I'm generalizing heavily to take nuances from it. But it's like, when you have a child who's who's come from home, their boiler's broken, like they've had like a rough morning, and now they're late to school. Teachers now saying, "Why are you late? No, you've been late all this week." And then there's just no nuance there. And I think oftentimes, and we've seen it in the evidence, Black students are often given like harsher punishments for the same sort of behaviors and all that things. And I think the system in general just doesn't cater to children, they cater to students. And I think that's what needs to change. And Black students are disproportionately affected by that. And I just think, I don't know, I've literally been trying to think about the same question for years. Like, for years, like, how do we swiftly target a lot of these students? And I think so I guess the two things are training for teachers. Teachers need to be able to deal with different students, be trained to deal with different circumstances, and understand that students like themselves are people. And I think the second thing is I just need to overhaul the system. I don't want to sound too radical. I can get to a radical bag, but we need to overhaul the system. I saw someone say Saturday schools, 100%. I think there needs to be supplementary education. I think it worked very well when it was booming a couple of decades ago. And we're in 2020 now, a number of decades ago. So yeah, I think that's a really good shout. Yeah.
Thanks, James. Courtney, any thoughts?
No, I completely agree. I think also the representation in teachers as well, particularly Black teachers, young Black teachers, but also male Black teachers as well. I think having that representation in teachers, as somebody said in the chat, really does help in them being able to individualize the school, the child and the student, as James was saying.
Awesome. Keeping on with this line of thinking about, radical, well, not necessarily radical, James. I don't even think that's radical at all. I feel like it's very bare minimum to expect representation. I mean, if you are a citizen of the United Kingdom, and the Black community has been so paramount to the development of culture and so many key institutions in the United Kingdom, that to look for representation at this stage in 2020 feels like bare minimum stuff, at least for me personally. And segueing on to, the next question for you guys, and thinking about, education systems in general, but particularly higher education, because this has actually been a question that's been thrown around recently. Do you think that higher education is still relevant to the Black community in the UK? And Courtney, I'm gonna roll that one out to you first.
Wow. I do, if it's done right. I think people don't talk a lot about, like James mentioned earlier, that it's quite mentally taxing to be Black at the university institution. Like at that level, oftentimes because the spaces are not inclusive and the systems aren't inclusive as we stated, it can be quite stressful. And because of that coming out, I think a lot of people, though they get opportunity, it doesn't seem worth it to have gone. People are kind of still recovering from that experience. But I think if done right, just like it could be, the relevance of higher education and maybe traditional institutions like university, their relevance is still being debated for society at general. But I think for us, to allow for us to have the diversity in the things we want to do, it's definitely still relevant. I don't think we should be forced to have to do it as a idea of, well, if you want to be, if you want any social mobility, you must go to a higher institution, or higher education institution. But I do think it should always be an opportunity and an option for us. And I think we should work towards creating the ability to have it as an option that we actually want to do, not that we're forced to do, and not something that could be damaging to us, but actually that we want to do.
For sure. James, any thoughts?
I think I basically agree with a lot of what Courtney said. I think higher education, particularly universities, is kind of a signal to people that, or it's at least a formal way to signal to people that you have a deeper understanding of a particular subject. That's kind of what I think of with higher education. And then, like in a wider societal sense, it's like, okay, it means that this piece of paper signals that you acquired these skills and you should know these things. Obviously, everyone knows that university teach you very I want to say very few skills. That's a lie. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, in that sense, it's relevant. But then I think in the other sense, in terms of Western higher education, it's never been, it was never built with Black people in mind. I think since like Black people start going to higher education in the Western context, it's just been like a constant battle. So I think answer that it's never been relevant, and I think it's, I don't know, like, are we? I don't know if we're currently fighting for it to become relevant for us. And I'm because it was all set up for like particular people, like especially I'll use King's as an example. King's is a very old institution, been around since 1829, and you know, and it's like since then it's only literally for over 100 and something years it was only admitting the same types of people. It's only recently it's even had to think about, okay, like, how do we teach this diverse cohort of students, and how do we make sure that they're leaving here with the skills they need to actually thrive? And we look at like skills gaps and etc. We know that universities aren't providing us with the things that we need to actually navigate life. So in short, no, but it's currently the signal that tells people that you know stuff. So we kind of have to still go. It's like capitalism. We should get rid of it, but while we're in it.
Oh, James, you're bringing up a very serious one there. I see you. But yeah, I think both of you guys have made some really, really interesting and excellent points. I think there's the wider conversation, right, of, you know, higher education and how slow higher education has been generally in society to innovate, right? Like, even in the midst of the current, you know, global pandemic, coronavirus, educational institutions have been hit the hardest, and, you know, they've been finding it really, really difficult to adapt. And now thinking about, you know, how do we now make these institutions that are struggling to adapt in society in general more relevant to other communities, but particularly and specifically the Black community? I agree that there is still definitely some relevance, but it's more of a case of we need to be very committed to, you know, transformation, but also articulating what that transformation looks like, right? So just like looking at some of the comments that you guys have been making throughout the panel, definitely agree that there's definitely areas within the system that need overhaul, right? Like parent-teacher educational engagement is an issue. You know, getting more Black parents invested, but also involved in the structures of the school is really, really important, just in general. And having more Black people that are school governors, for example, that can actually engage with the interpersonal engagements that people have. Having representation in teaching and having more representation at the student level. Because I think at the moment, there's so much focus on talent getting more diverse students in. But do we have the capabilities of retaining? Do we have the capabilities of nurturing that talent? Do we fundamentally have systems in place and structures in place which are actually conducive to inclusion for the Black community, both in higher education, but also in other educational institutions? So yeah, it's a meaty one, basically. There's lots of moving parts to think about. And segueing on to the next question, which is all about innovation, but specifically technology, digital skills gap, and just innovation in general. We've seen that we're really entering a tech age / digital age. What are your thoughts as it pertains to education, but also labor market, access to jobs, that kind of stuff? What are your thoughts on whether the Black community is behind when it comes to innovation? Because I know that is a narrative that's spun not just in the UK, but also in a lot of other diaspora. What are your thoughts towards that? And James, I think I'll start with you.
Okay. I think when it comes to innovation, I think Black people, and I say Black people is very general. I don't believe there is one Black people, but just for the sake of simplicity, I think that generally speaking, like we're very innovative, and I think it's because it's been out of necessity. I even think about like my time in Jamaica. Like I think oftentimes the people who had it the hardest were the most innovative because they had to be they had to find new ways of doing things. They had to find ways of making things last longer or work more efficiently, etc. So I don't really think there's really a problem in terms of innovation within the community, because even growing up, the people around me, they didn't have access to opportunity and stuff, but they could make things work with the things they had around them, which and I think you find that especially with a lot of people that kind of that's becoming more socially mobile, a lot of the skills that they learned when they needed to use them, they're saying, wow, how are you so innovative? Like, where'd you learn this? We learned this on the streets. Like, do you understand? So I think that's not the problem. So as I kind of alluded to before, the problem is just access to opportunity to kind of formalize that innovation and portray it in a way that other people can understand. So I think oftentimes like people see it through like coding. They say, if you can code, wow, like so innovative, you can create new things, all that stuff, or like simplify processes that the mainstream understand. And I think that's kind of what we're lacking, because we haven't had that access before. We haven't been able to essentially like formalize that innovation. I don't know if I'm using the right words to kind of explain what I'm trying to say, but yeah, I'm gonna land there.
Land the plane there. Don't worry, and we enjoyed the ride. Courtney, I'm gonna hand it over to you, miss.
No, I think James has put it so perfectly that I don't think innovation is not really something we lack. A lot of people have been doing it. Black people have been doing it. When I say we, like similar to James, it's just a Black people general, but it's not really a specific. So it's kind of a lot of generalization here. But I think for Black people and Black students, let's say, innovation is something you grow up kind of seeing other people do. And so oftentimes when you do get to higher education, the things that you've been able to maybe teach yourself or develop yourself and are really talented at, because they are maybe not formal skills or things that, because the standard is measured according to the system standards, right? And if we're saying that the systems of higher education, which they are not built with inclusivity in mind, oftentimes the innovation that you've grown up developing out of your own hard work or whatever is not really acknowledged as innovation at all. And so if you don't really ascribe to or tick the boxes of the things that are already there, as James said, you're seen as not innovative. But I think if we did have exposure to those resources, and it's not like we can't do it, it's that we need to be exposed to it. And those things, especially in a digital world, a lot of these things, they are available through tech, and tech is not necessarily cheap. And so if we could, especially knowing that, for example, the disproportionate amount of ethnic minorities who are living below the poverty line or considered in living in poverty in the UK, we know that there's an issue there economically. And so if institutions could pour into that, then they would see us kind of fit into their mold. I guess the question some people would want to ask is, do we want to fit into that? That's another question for another day.
You guys be branching off into those tangential meta questions, I see. But we're here for it. Awesome. Well, that's even funny. Someone was just mentioning about the access to jobs, which was literally the next question. So very, very nice segue. But how do you think education in its present state has made it, or if you think, I mean, this is an open question. I know that this sounds a bit leading, but how do you think that education has either made it difficult or easier for people within the Black community to access jobs and opportunities and enter the labor market more generally? Courtney, I think I'll start with you this time.
I don't know if it's made it easier. I think generally, like James mentioned before, and yourself, Renee, that paper does symbolize, okay, hopefully you've learned something and now you're skilled and equipped to do a particular job in a particular industry. But if we look at kind of the higher education to industry pipeline, oftentimes it's the same people going from these, traditional institutions going into industries and then becoming the gatekeepers of those industries, right? So oftentimes there's not really that much of a difference between the structural disadvantages that are in higher education and in the labor market. So I think I guess it's going to sound pessimistic, but I think the pipeline works very well. It's just unfortunate that the pipeline wasn't built with us in mind, right? So you're still kind of struggling to see that transition, that easy transition like it is for other graduates.
Nice. James, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so again, we're just agreeing. But I agree with a lot of things that Courtney said, and just sort of, when I think, as you said, because the pipeline is not built with us in mind, it's very difficult to sort of say, oh, we need to improve it because it's working where it should. And I think if you look at it, like the school you go to hugely affects the level of attainment you're probably going to leave with. And then even like the school that you go with usually affects the opportunities or even the things that you're aware of, just more generally in the world, and the teachers that you kind of encounter, and the sort of extra resources that you're able to access, or the extracurricular activities that your school offers, and all those different things that really contribute to the kind of university that you go to, and then the kind of jobs that you go into afterwards. So I think you're kind of set up to fail. And I know a lot of people talk about like Black excellence, all that stuff, but Black excellence is in spite of, it's not, oh yes, you put your head down in school and you worked hard and all that stuff. And obviously those things are true, but it's in spite of all those barriers, you are still able to succeed. And students shouldn't have to battle with all these barriers to succeed. Just like everybody else gets the sort of the privilege to just go to school, get all the resources and get learnings that they need. Go to university. And this is a very the kind of context I'm speaking of is low income Black. That's kind of perspective I'm coming from. So I understand that it's not everyone's experience, but I think that is a huge problem. And until we sort of fix that, then we're going to be having the same problems. Because even like when people get into work, like let's say you're working for a corporate environment, there's so many like nuanced things you have to know. Like I think when I was 17, like even like learning about where to put your like what cutlery to use at formal dinners. First time I did that spun me. I said, why are there so many forks? is it depending on how big you are, you choose one that fits your mouth? Like I didn't understand. I think a lot of people aren't even exposed to that at a young age. Or even like language, or even like code switching that a lot of people don't have to think about, but a lot of low income, particularly Black people, have to think about code switching. But I think like what's great, and it's something that you do, Renee, is you, and we've had conversation about like actually just connecting young people opportunities, because I think that's the big gap. Like once you start connecting young people opportunities, there are web opportunities out there, they can access them and engage with them. I think that's really going to help to essentially like solve this problem and to make them aware of the fact that one, there are people out there that are willing to help them. I think that's often like the biggest surprise for me, is that I'm here every day, I'm begging for young Caribbean boys, and then like I'll meet one, and one or like says a little bit too old. I'm like, where were you when I was looking for you? Like, where were you? He's like, oh, I didn't know about this. I think even in my experience before I came to King's, I didn't know a lot about a lot of the programs that they had. I didn't do a single thing with King's before I went to King's. First time I went there was my interview. So a lot of things like that could have helped me in the process, I wasn't privy to, because my school didn't tell me, my school didn't know about it. There's a lot.
There's a lot of moving parts. And I think one thing that really links both of you guys' perspective is this idea that education can often serve as this perpetuator of a lot of the issues that we see within industry, or like, within the labor market, right? Access to opportunities, access to funding, interpersonal relationships, even unconscious bias. I know in the chat, some of you guys are commenting about, some of your experiences, both in the corporate world, but also in other industries of, making applications and not getting that much further. I remember reading a report recently, actually, that talks about the fact that people from specifically Black backgrounds have to make over 60% more applications to get to the same stage of consideration as their white counterparts, and this was done blindly. Like all they saw was the names. So yeah, making sure that we are in a place to address that pipeline and start thinking about building, not only just building out those structures, but also building out our own. So yeah, definitely. Somebody mentioned, of course, BYP is such a great example of that, really building and really focusing on ways in which we can invest in the education of our own communities, as well as build and support networks that are conducive to building the community in general. Okay, last question before I throw it out to you guys to ask us and, you know, the panelists some questions. Alternative education. So I know in the chat you guys have also been talking and pointing out, you know, some great initiatives, and I'm sure you guys have come into contact with so many other programs, initiatives and projects that are all addressing the issue of education for the Black community. Do you believe that alternative education in any form may be better equipped to support the education of Black people? And I will start with Courtney.
Thank you.
Yes.
James, I saw your eyes.
It is it's quite a lot. Do I think they are? It depends on who's leading them. I think, as we've established, oftentimes, you know, a system's only reflective of the knowledge or the ignorance of those who are creating it, right? So even if you do create alternative systems, I mean, who's creating it? So I think it depends on the ones that currently exist. I don't know if I'll be able to say that they definitely are better suited to Black students or, you know, people who want to become professionals. But I do think that they are a good route to go down, as we've seen in the chat. You know, so many suggestions of let's create alternatives. Let's actually lead something. And as you said, BYP, so many other organizations are doing that, you know, creating or exposing things which are already doing things with us in mind. And I think that that's really important to focus on. I think alternative ones, as we've discussed already, traditional systems clearly just aren't working. Could they get better? Definitely. Will they get better overnight? No. So if we create alternatives that are actually led by people who are aware of these issues, who have checked their biases, who understand what it means to be inclusive and diverse, and understand equity as well, I think there will be progress in the alternative education route.
Awesome. And James, you want to pitch in?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like everything is about the kind of people involved, and I think there's been like a lot of willful ignorance with a lot of the systems and a lot of the things that have been created. And I think although like I don't believe like Black people should do the work when it comes to like I just don't believe Black people should be the ones doing the work. I think where we are currently and kind of systems in place, we kind of have to. And I think it's that commitment to focusing on like whichever part of the revolution. I call it the revolution. Or whichever part of it you sort of can lend help to, and just working as hard as you can. Because I think if we kind of wait for a lot of the institutions to do better or change or fix themselves, they weren't designed for us, and I fundamentally believe that. I do think we sort of have to, like, so the reason I'm going to university is because I understand that in the system that we live in, a piece of paper means something to the world, and I don't think that we can just completely disengage with the systems that exist, because then you kind of leave yourself like hanging dry. But at the same time, I think we do need to create those supplementary systems that help support Black people within the formal system, because that's kind of the way I see us thriving, I guess. But yeah, I think it has to be all hands in, and I think there needs more organising together. But then that lends to discussion, like who is everyone, and what's everyone's experiences, and what's everyone's goals, and then you find it becomes a messy conversation. But yeah, I think everyone has a role to play, and I think there can definitely be alternatives that are supplementary that can help us thrive as a community.
Yeah, I agree. I hear both of your points. I think that whether we can say better right now, I'm not too sure. I think we need to think about education as a holistic experience, right? The fact that you learn and you draw from so many different sources. And I think it's a case of disestablishing this idea that, you know, traditional institutions are the be all and end all of education, point blank, period. As you said, James, it would definitely be stupid, basically, to deny the fact that there is a signaling, there's a gesture that comes with saying, you know, I went to X institution or I got this degree or whatever. But it would be wholly, it would be a damn shame, really, to forego the education that we can learn from grassroots communities. Black communities have a long history of supplementary education through Saturday schools, and you know, we can learn so much from the diaspora just in general. There's so many education systems that run concurrently around our established institutions, and I think it's, especially for the Black community, embracing a holistic idea of what education means. And where we get that education from, whilst being cognizant of the fact that there's so many different forces that are playing into what education is valued over, you know, other alternative forms of education. Even the idea of it being alternative education, maybe the question shouldn't even be, you know, we shouldn't even be terming it as alternative, and more so supplementary or, you know, holistic education. But yeah, turning it over to some of the questions that we've had from the wonderful participants. First question we had was, do you think that people from private schools have an edge over people that went to public schools when it comes to higher education, but also when it comes to operating in industry, accessing resources, opportunities, and beyond? So I think I will, who am I going to pick on today? I will pick on Courtney.
Yes, I think there is, because you're exposed to capital, different sorts of capital, you know, and social capital and the knowledge of these institutions. Now, that's not to say that there aren't barriers because of race, but I think household income definitely contributes to the pipeline of somebody's education journey, but also their professional journey, as we see through so many statistics. And so I think it's really important to, I mean, it's not just to say if you go to private school, your entire life is made for you. And it's not also to say that getting Black kids into private school is the answer. But I do think there is an advantage there just because of smaller classrooms, people who, you know, being targeted maybe by elite institutions as well, previous relationships, things like that definitely pose an advantage.
Awesome. James?
Yeah, just very quickly, again, completely agree. And I think, yeah, it's just being privy to a lot of things that people that go to like state schools, for example, just aren't. A lot of insider knowledge, like how to patent this application, or, oh, like my dad is the CEO, I'll have a word. And I think people, like the social capital you get from private schools, I think can't be understated. Like it has a huge impact on even the confidence. I always think that people at the private school just naturally or are taught to be more confident because they're taught that a certain level of entitlement. Like if you want something, you're entitled to get it as long as you work hard and as long as you do the things you're supposed to. But I think a lot of students in state schools, for example, huge generalization, by the way, but a lot of students in state schools, they often feel like, oh, like, am I good enough for that? Should I be applying? Yeah, so I definitely think there is an edge. In an ideal world, I have nothing against private schools, but in an ideal world, like, all education would give you that same edge. And I think that's what everyone should be pushing for, not to send your school, like send your kids to private school. It's actually how to create a system that's more equitable so that all students, regardless of school you go, can have or can be privy to a lot of this access and privilege and resources that private school children have.
Awesome. And the next question is, what do you think of the necessity of having quotas either in employment or education? And I'm gonna roll that out to James first.
Quotas. I think they're important because it's like the example of Monopoly. I can't remember who the lady was, but she was like, 400 years, like Black people worked and just gave. They had to, by law, give to white people slavery, etc., colonization, blah, blah, all that stuff. And it's like, actually now we're saying, you guys have literally been picking white people for hundreds of years. We're asking for like equity, because I think like everyone's talking about equality, but for us to have equality, there has to be like fairness, that equity. So actually, because you've been taken from us for 100 years, it is time to, you're going to have to give a bit more now. You're going to have to disperse the resources, disperse the wealth, etc. So I am for it, 100%. But I don't want people to get confused between quota and like quality. Like they just because there's a quota doesn't mean that the candidates aren't of quality or shouldn't or wouldn't have been chosen otherwise. It's actually because we recognise there's a diversity problem, because we want our workplace more inclusive, we're going to hire more diverse talent, and we put a quota in mind. But all this talent is still quality. Yeah.
Awesome. Courtney, any thoughts?
No, that's definitely spot on. I think the issue with quotas, I totally believe they're important, but I think the issues with them is the people who need to fill those quotas, like the gatekeepers of maybe applications, they may see, and I think generally people see, like James mentioned, that, okay, if we need to fill this quota, that means we need to drop the quality of who comes in, right? And I think that attitude displays that people see quotas or just getting more Black students in or getting more Black people in our workplace as the root of the issue, when it's actually really not. If we have more corporations who say they want to be more diverse and have these quotas in place, then they also need to be committed to doing the work at the root level of what's going on there, to help people, like you said, equity, to help people with the amount of help that they actually need in different areas and in different forms to be there. Not just to say, you know, well, you guys just come in, because there are a lot of people who are extremely qualified and have great quality at it. So that perception of, well, we need to lower our standard, I think for me definitely reflects that traditional institutions see this as a surface level issue, and they create then performative gestures of inclusion, which I think is very, very dangerous in itself. But if they kind of get to the root of changing actual systems, and using that to address the systems, quotas is a great place to start, but it's not where the work ends.
Completely agree. And before I chime in, just want to say big shout out to Jasmine in the chat. I see you dropping in some great organizations that are doing some really good work in the space. So please, guys, if you do have any other organizations that are worth shouting out / looking into, drop them in the chat. Let's get them followed, mentioned, and supported. But yeah, I echo pretty much both of everything you guys have said. For me, quotas are only the tip of the iceberg. And whilst quotas in some places are necessary, I don't want educational institutions or any kind of corporations to get it twisted and think that the work is done. The work is only beginning, because quotas means that you recognize that there is a dearth of diversity in your institution, right? And we forget that the process of getting in, first and foremost, is a difficult one, right? There's so many barriers that, you know, just letting them in, even this whole idea of letting them in, right? Like, we have to seek permission to enter this space when really we are, like, you know, key drivers of innovation in a lot of these places. Once we do enter these spaces, how committed are, you know, these institutions to creating inclusive workspaces or inclusive educational spaces? And what does that inclusion actually entail and look like beyond, you know, a Black History Month something and maybe a couple of African themed tappers for the networking events? Like, it's got to be more than that. So I think that it's important to recognize that quotas, or, you know, having some kind of goal when it comes to having representation, should function as a goal, but shouldn't function as the only thing that an organization is doing to rectify or actively fight against this, you know, various systems that work in tandem with each other, that are not at all conducive for Black people at all. So that is my kind of 2 pence. Just seen a question on the chat, which was along the lines of, how do we hold educational institutions to account who may have diverse talent, students and programs, but it is rooted in tokenism and there doesn't appear to be a real change? I think in terms of like my last answer, there there just needs to be more. Like, we need to expect more. And I think it was encapsulated really, really well by a lot of the work and responses that we've seen from brands, for example, post the Black Lives Matter outcry, where it was very, very kind of like tokenistic in the sense of, you know, we're committing X amount, or, you know, we're trying to recruit more diverse people. It needs to be a holistic program of transformation and change. It cannot just be bare minimum lip service, we're committed to diversity anymore. So in terms of holding them account, quotas is definitely one way to do that, but also we need to start looking at other metrics. Like, you know, I know sometimes people love to, like, we're a data-driven society, we love to look at the hard numbers, but we also need to start collecting, you know, experiences and taking them a lot more seriously. We need to start looking at the qualitative data. What is the experience of Black people, and not just Black people, but also along intersections? You know, like, what is the experience of Black women, Black trans folk? What are the experiences of Black disabled people? Because Blackness is also not a monolith, and often in these conversations about diversity, different markers of difference are lumped together in a monolith. So actually breaking down and holding these institutions and communities to account for their actual systems of change. Like, how are they going to change all of these like spaces? What is the plan? Like, I want to see, at least for me personally, I want to see a game plan. I don't want to see like what you're trying to reach for. I want to see a game plan. But yeah, I've been hogging the line. Do you guys have any thoughts to chime in? Courtney, any thoughts?
I completely agree. And I think a great example that you brought up was the brand situation. And having seen a lot of beauty brands in particular, there was this hashtag that was like, you know, pull up or shut up. And it was this kind of demand for transparency in terms of what are your current systems and what are your current plans? Because like you said, a lot of it is lip service, you know, post a black square, we're committed to diversity. And it's like, well, how? What are you actually planning on doing? And I think we can still be in a place to demand that transparency, because there are a lot of people who want to put in the work. Though I do believe as well, it is not our job to do all of the work, but a lot of these offices and institutions, they don't have a clue, nor sometimes do they care. And so there are a lot of people who are available in those institutions, whether it be Black students or Black professionals, who do want to help, but they shouldn't be doing the lump sum of the work. These institutions need to be committed to being very transparent, asking for help, paying for the help as well, but also providing the resources needed to create real systematic change within their companies or the institutions themselves.
Any thoughts, James?
Yeah, you guys covered quite a lot of them. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like, these statements of solidarity, boo, they need to stop that, because it doesn't mean anything. Like, anyone can write a statement, or they can get their one black employee to draft something and then send it out. It's like, phew, we've done that. We've kept them happy. And I think, as you rightly said, like, we need to demand more. I don't think it's enough. Even with Nike, like, Nike put out quite a good response. Even that, and actually, I think Nike is quite diverse from what I remember. But actually, we need to demand more. It's not enough to just put out things like, what are you doing? And as you said, the experiences of people is so important, because you can say, I have this many Black people in the office or whatever, but if the experiences aren't positive, then clearly something's wrong. Or if you're not retaining them, I think that's the bigger issue. I think a lot of people are getting numbers through the door now, but they're leaving after a year, or leaving after 2 years, because it's been such a bad experience, or so mentally draining or taxing. And I think also kind of something that I'm really pushing for in my workplace is that I'm tired of these conversations. Number one, we had enough discussions. We already know what the problem is. Like, the system is racist, full stop. So open your purse, first of all. But I think the second thing is, like, I think white people need to be comfortable enough to start the conversation. And by like, when I say that, I just mean essentially that I'm tired of hearing, oh, I didn't have to bring it up, or oh, it's a very uncomfortable subject. Why is it uncomfortable? We've been living the system for 100 years. We're tired. We're actually dying. I don't care if you're uncomfortable. People are dying as a result of the system. So I'm so sorry you're uncomfortable, but you better go read the book, and you better come and tell me what you've learned. because and that's the demand of especially like your managers or whoever. They should be able to say, hey James, like I thought this idea because of the research and because of the reading and because of the information I've gathered. Why am I always the one that has come up with ideas for Black students? Why is it that you who work, you're even my superior? Surely you should know more about the things we're working on. And it's not enough to just hire Black people to work on Black people issues. Everyone in the office and everyone in the company, wherever you work, needs to have a baseline understanding. For your organization to become anti-racist, everyone has to have a baseline understanding. Until then, you're actually just talking. I'm gonna land here because I feel me. I'm getting started.
Yo, I'm so annoyed because we're really getting into that. Oh, miss me with that whole Black people must take up a diversity and inclusion role. Absolutely miss me with that because it is.
Or it's the only time you have them speak is on diversity and inclusion, and everything else, we don't want your voice.
Ooh, well, guys, time absolutely flew. And I wish we could dig into that a little bit more because there's definitely something to be said about the roles and the labor that Black people play within the workforce within these institutions and the expectation that it always falls squarely on Black people to speak up about racism and that this is the onus is entirely on us. But before we go, if you guys could give maybe 1 or 2 concrete actions that people can do, like engage, take away with, because I'm so big on being action oriented and how we can make positive change through action as opposed to, you know, just having conversation about these things and then it staying within this circle. So what are some concrete ways that people can now go away and think, okay, I'm actually helping, you know, forward Black community education? And I will start with James.
I think for me, the first thing is we all need to educate ourselves. And I don't want to sound like, oh, everyone needs to go and read, but I think that's a big thing. I think as a community, just people in general, we should all have, like, as I mentioned before, like a baseline understanding to be able to contribute effectively to a lot of these discussions, to be able to hold people accountable, and also be able to see what things are actually are actually going to positively contribute to the sort of movement. Because I think oftentimes we do a lot of things and a bit short-sighted, like asking brands to post their statement. It doesn't really do anything for anyone. And actually, if we're all kind of like knowledgeable, and that's not necessarily reading, go and watch videos, go and like talk to different people, etc. And I think the next thing is do what you can within the space that you are. I think everyone wants to be like the Martin Luther King or the Malcolm X, and they want to lead a revolution. But actually, if you're a teacher in a school, you can start with your class. If you're a student, you can start with your societies and just have a positive impact on the people and the communities around you. Because essentially, like, not to like quote Tesco, but every little actually helps. And everyone can contribute in their own way. And it doesn't have to be big and grand and fancy. Yeah, those are 2 things.
Awesome. Courtney, any final words?
Yeah, I would definitely just back what James is saying. I think it's really important for us to put our resources and our weight behind people who are already doing the work and doing the work really well. I think when things like this arise, it's always people thinking about, oh, let's start something. And it's like, well, people have already started the work and they've been doing it for a really long time. And it's time to give them the momentum that they really need by putting all of our weight behind it and all of our resources behind it. So really seeing how you can directly, not just by following, but actually directly help and assist the organizations and businesses that are pioneering these things and really are doing it with a heart for change.
I so love that, especially the point on collaboration. I think I was seeing something on social media a couple of hours ago that was talking about the importance of unity and collaboration. And Courtney, as you said, that momentum, and then James coming in with the making sure that you have impact in, you know, your local communities and your immediate surroundings. So true. Like, we really do need to start devising ways in which we can collaborate and start working practically together to be able to have more momentum, more impact. Well, unfortunately, guys, that concludes Supa Network's segment. I just want to say a major thank you to our wonderful panelists, Courtney and James. James, where can we find you? Where can we follow you? Where can we read your work?
Let me just type it in the chat.
James is an awesome writer. He writes prolifically on a lot of these matters. Courtney, where can we find you? Where can we engage with you? Where can we follow and support?
Great. So on Twitter at CD Byoting, on YouTube, Courtney Daniela, on Instagram, Courtney Daniela. And if you want to email me at courtney@cdblondon.com.
Parfait. Thank you very much. And also, of course, guys, follow and support Supa Network. We are in the business of supporting Black communities, Black people, Black individuals. We're really trying to be a force for change for creators and entrepreneurs in the space. And we are rolling out a lot of information, community spaces, digital skills training as well. We're big on education. So please follow us, support us at Supa Network on all platforms, as well as our website. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this webinar.
Sorry, we need to say big up to Renee as well.
Yeah.
Excellent panelist, and as always, I'm always learning from you. Every word that comes out of your mouth, I'm like, Google that one. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it, and also thank you to Courtney as well, man. Shout out to you guys.
No, thank you guys. This is an amazing platform, and it's really an honor to be here. So thank you, Renee. Thank you, Supa. Thanks, James. You're always amazing to speak to.
Oh, we are just amazing. I'm feeling the love. It's great stuff. But please, guys, stick around. The next panel will be starting at 7:30, I believe, and you're in for a treat with some more excellent conversation. So I will bid all of you guys adieu and hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar series.
Take care, guys.
Take care.